In the summer of 1227, a funeral procession moved quietly across the grasslands of Mongolia. Soldiers rode beside the body of the most feared man alive. Along the way, they killed everyone they passed. Travelers, herders, entire families. Not out of cruelty alone, but for one purpose: no one could be allowed to know where Genghis Khan was buried. Nearly 800 years later, that grave has still never been found. This is the story of how a boy left to starve on the open steppe became the ruler of the largest connected land empire in human history, and how the secret of his final resting place became one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in the world. Before he was Genghis Khan, he was Temujin, born around 1162 into a world where survival depended on alliance, loyalty, and the strength of your horse. His father, a minor tribal chief, was poisoned by rivals when Temujin was still a boy. Without a protector, his family was abandoned by their own clan. His mother raised her children on roots, fish, and whatever the harsh land would give. For a time, Temujin was even captured and enslaved by a rival clan, forced to wear a wooden yoke around his neck. Historians see this early period as brutal preparation. A childhood defined by hunger, betrayal, and the constant threat of death shaped a man who would later demand absolute loyalty from everyone around him. By his 20s, Temujin was building alliances, and losing them, and rebuilding them again. He fought former friends who became enemies and forged bonds with former enemies who became his most trusted commanders. What set him apart was not just ambition. It was a radical idea for the time: loyalty and skill mattered more than bloodline. He promoted soldiers based on ability, not family name. In a society organized entirely around clan hierarchy, this was close to revolutionary. In 1206, at a great gathering of Mongol and Turkic tribes, Temujin was declared Genghis Khan, a title often translated as universal ruler. For the first time, the fractured tribes of the steppe were united under a single leader. What began as one man's fight to survive had become the foundation of an empire that would eventually stretch from the Pacific Ocean to the edge of Europe. If you find yourself pulled into how one person reshaped the map of the world, you are not alone. Millions of people are drawn to stories like this one, where a single life changes the course of history. Stay with this story, because what Genghis Khan built next would terrify the world. The Mongol military machine that emerged after 1206 was unlike anything settled civilizations had faced. Mongol horsemen could ride over 60 miles in a single day, switching between multiple horses to keep their pace. Their composite bows, made from layers of horn, wood, and sinew, could strike targets at long range, even while riding at full speed. Soldiers trained from childhood, so a Mongol army was not simply strong. It was fast, coordinated, and terrifyingly disciplined. Genghis Khan also understood something many conquerors ignored: information. He built an intelligence network of scouts and spies who studied enemy cities before a single soldier attacked. He offered mercy to cities that surrendered without a fight, allowing them to keep their lives and often their trade. But cities that resisted faced devastating consequences, a strategy designed to spread fear ahead of his armies and weaken resistance before it even began. That strategy was tested violently in 1219. A caravan of Mongol merchants, sent by Genghis Khan to open trade with the neighboring Khwarazmian Empire, was captured and executed by a local governor. When Genghis Khan sent envoys to demand justice, the Khwarazmian Shah had them killed as well. It was a fatal miscalculation. Genghis Khan turned his full military force towards Central Asia. What followed was one of the most devastating military campaigns in recorded history. Cities like Bukhara, Samarkand, and Merv, once thriving centers of scholarship, trade, and art, were destroyed. Archaeological and historical records suggest the population of Merv, a city that may have held several 100,000 people, was killed or scattered within days. Contemporary chroniclers described rivers of the region running dark from destruction. Modern historians debate the exact death tolls, since medieval accounts often exaggerated numbers for dramatic effect, but even conservative estimates describe catastrophic loss of life. This was not simply conquest. It was the calculated erasure of resistance, and it left a trauma across Central Asia that shaped regional memory for centuries. And yet, alongside this brutality, something unexpected took root. Once a region submitted to Mongol rule, Genghis Khan protected it. He guaranteed safe passage along trade routes, enforced religious tolerance across Buddhist, Muslim, Christian, and shamanist communities, and created a relay messenger system called the Yuan, which allowed information and goods to move across the empire faster than at any point in prior history. Historians call the resulting era of connected trade and relative internal stability the Pax Mongolica, the Mongol Peace. Silk, spices, technology, and even ideas moved along protected roads that stretched from China to the edge of Europe. The same empire capable of devastating cities also, paradoxically, made the world more connected than it had ever been. This contradiction sits at the center of how historians understand Genghis Khan. He was both destroyer and builder, both the source of immense human suffering and the architect of a trade network that reshaped the ancient world's economy. Neither side of that truth cancels out the other. In 1227, during a military campaign against the Tangut kingdom in what is now northwestern China, Genghis Khan died. The exact cause remains unknown. Some historical accounts mention a fall from his horse. Others describe illness. A popular legend claims he was killed by a captured princess, but no reliable historical evidence supports that story, and most serious historians treat it as myth rather than fact. What we do know with certainty is what happened after his death. His followers were determined that his burial site would never be discovered, and disappear from history it did. According to Mongol tradition, the guards who buried him were killed by the soldiers who escorted them. Those soldiers were then killed as well, layer after layer of secrecy designed to protect the grave from looters and enemies. Some accounts describe horses being driven over the burial ground afterward, erasing any visible trace. Whether every detail of this tradition is historically precise or partly legend passed down through generations, the outcome is undeniable. Despite centuries of searching, using historical records, satellite imaging, and modern archaeological surveys, the tomb of Genghis Khan has never been located. Before continuing further into the empire he left behind, it's worth sitting with that fact for a moment. One of the most powerful and consequential humans who ever lived has no known grave. No monument marks where his body rests. In a way, the empire itself became his monument instead. After his death, the empire did not collapse. It expanded even further, though the man who inherited it faced a challenge his father never had to solve. How do you govern a territory too vast for any one person to control? Genghis Khan's third son, Ogedai, became the next great Khan, and under his leadership, Mongol forces pushed deeper into unfamiliar territory, including Europe. In 1241, Mongol armies under the general Batu Khan achieved a series of devastating victories in what is now Poland and Hungary. European kingdoms, unprepared for Mongol tactics and mobility, suffered heavy losses. Historians describe genuine panic spreading across European courts, with some rulers fearing the collapse of Christendom itself. Then, just as suddenly as the invasion began, Mongol forces withdrew. Ogedai Khan had died back in Mongolia, and Mongol custom required senior leaders to return home for the selection of a new great Khan. Europe was spared, not by military defeat, but by a succession crisis thousands of miles away. It remains one of history's more striking examples of how a single unrelated event, on the other side of the world, can quietly alter the fate of an entire continent. The empire eventually grew so large that it split into four major khanates, each controlling a different region: the Golden Horde across Russia and parts of Eastern Europe, the Ilkhanate across Persia and the Middle East, the Chagatai Khanate across Central Asia, and the Yuan dynasty in China, founded by Genghis Khan's grandson, Kublai Khan. Kublai Khan adopted many aspects of Chinese governance and culture, becoming a bridge between Mongol tradition and Chinese imperial rule. Under his reign, the Mongol capital, and later Chinese cities under Yuan control, welcomed foreign traders and travelers, including the Venetian merchant Marco Polo, whose written account of his journeys introduced medieval Europe to the scale and sophistication of the Mongol-controlled East. But holding together an empire this vast, spread across different climates, cultures, and languages, proved harder than conquering it. Internal rivalries between khanates grew. Trade networks that had connected the empire also, unintentionally, connected it to disease. Many historians believe the same roads that carried silk and spices also helped carry the pathogen behind the Black Death westward in the 14th century, contributing to one of the deadliest pandemics in human history. By the late 1300s and into the 1400s, the once unified Mongol territories had fractured into competing regional powers, each shaped by, but no longer united under, the vision Genghis Khan had built. If a story like this makes you want to understand more about how ancient movements of people and trade still shape the world today, you're exactly the kind of listener this kind of history is made for. What remains today is a legacy far larger than most people realize. Genetic studies published in the early 2000s identified a Y chromosome lineage carried by a notable percentage of men across Central Asia, a pattern researchers linked to descent from a small number of male ancestors roughly matching the era and territory of Genghis Khan's dynasty. While the exact family connection cannot be proven with certainty, the scale of the pattern reflects just how far Mongol rule and Mongol bloodlines spread across Eurasia. Beyond genetics, the trade networks the empire protected helped accelerate the exchange of gunpowder technology, paper-making, astronomical knowledge, and countless goods between East and West, laying groundwork for connections that would shape the coming centuries. And still, the man at the center of it all remains, in one very literal sense, hidden from us. We know his childhood of hunger and betrayal. We know the empire he built through both merciless conquest and remarkable tolerance. We know the roads he protected and the cities he destroyed. But we do not know where his body lies. Somewhere beneath the grasslands of Mongolia, in a landscape that has changed little in 8 centuries, the resting place of one of history's most consequential figures remains exactly what his followers intended it to be. Unknown. Perhaps that is the most fitting ending for a man who was never meant to be contained, not by rival clans in his youth, not by the empires he conquered, and in the end, not even by a marked grave. His story survives instead in the roads he opened, the cultures he connected, and the vast, unanswered silence of the steppe where he was laid to rest. If this journey into a hidden grave and a world-changing empire stayed with you, there is always more history waiting to be uncovered, and more stories like this one to explore, in English, at your own pace.